So just before we start, I just have one item to start with, Jennifer.
Hello everyone, I just wanted to ask that we all take a minute of silence to remember those who were flooded, who have since passed away. If you would join me in a moment of silence.
So thanks for coming out. I know it's been a while since we've had a chance to meet as a larger group. Tonight I wanted to have a bit of chance to reflect on what we heard from the small group sessions, to talk about some of the questions that have come up about the grant and the implementation of the grant and the appraisals and that kind of thing. Spend a bit of time just to go over what those in-kind scenarios are and what people have kind of told us about how they might work or what they won't work for people. And some of you maybe haven't had a chance to discuss them in depth, and others have, so we had a bit of chance for that. And we'll also definitely have a message from our case management team as well. So I just wanted to start recognizing some of the folks in the room who are going to be speaking tonight. So Mayor Brian Taylor will be coming up in a moment, and then Daniel Drexler, Chris Marsh, the Deputy Recovery Manager, and he's my counterpart with the RDKB side of things, and Darren Pratt and Rachel Warner will also be coming up. So if there's anyone else I missed that's going to have something to say, of course, all of you are going to have a chance, lots of chance to talk. It's 6:30 now. Shooting for 8 o'clock, but being responsive to less or more depending on what your needs are. And thank you for coming out. So, Mayor Taylor.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for coming out this evening. It's been a long road. I think we're moving forward. I'd like to really compliment the efforts by Graham, Chris, Daniel, his teams in doing all they can to find other ways to help where we can't help with cash. We can help with other things. So that's what's on the agenda tonight. And again, I think you'll find City Council has really been bending over backwards as well to look at all the options. So we're continuing to do that. This is not the end to the process. We are going to continue to lobby government, continue to search for other things that we can do that will ease that burden. So I anticipate this to be a good evening, and thank you very much for everybody for turning out.
Daniel Drexler, Corporate Officer.
Hi everyone. I don't think I've met a lot of you guys personally yet. I'm the corporate officer for the City of Grand Forks, so I haven't been involved too much with flood recovery on the front end, but I've been involved with council on the back side. So I just got a couple notes prepared, and I'm going to read some of it, and some of it I'll be able to speak at. Graham gave me all but like an hour or so to do this. I quickly wanted to thank the BFR team. They've done a tremendous job over the last 16 months. Chris Marsh, Graham leading the team. There's Darren Pratt on the social wellness side. Rachel helped out on that side. I know a few of them. I haven't met all of them. A lot of the caseworkers that are here, I don't know personally. Kevin Gates, he was tremendous on hosting some of these meetings, leading everybody through it, and doing the communication side, getting the web pages updated whenever possible, putting news releases out, setting up the meetings. My kudos to him. David Reed, on the infrastructure side, what they've done to pull things together in the regional district side and locally, amazing. Emmeline, Marshall Hill, for dealing with anything on the housing side and getting the Mennonite disaster services crew here. Like these guys have gone above and beyond for the last 16 months, and their staff, their support teams, anybody. Council has done, the past council, the current council, they've tried doing anything and everything that they could at the time with the knowledge that they had. Director Russell, trying to still arrange meetings with provincial entities here while we're gonna head to UBCM here in the next little while. Now though, the DMAF portion of this isn't really BFR side. This is now coming over to the city side, and I think that was explained now very well. The BFR side, the recovery side, is starting to wind down over the next year, is I guess the anticipated schedule. Until this is done, though Graham is helping out now with the DMAF a little bit especially on this side here. Like I said earlier, I stayed behind in City Hall and I heard the stories coming in from the crew. There was only 3 managers left behind and a couple staff trying to keep the business of the city going. It wasn't fun to hear the stuff. We set up so many meetings with council and with the different groups, workshops, over the span of a couple months. I've never had this many workshops or agendas prepared. It was a tremendous feast. I've been involved with the economic recovery and economic development recently, partially from the Rural Dividend Fund that's helping out a lot of the businesses in the downtown core, but also trying to gain support for industrial purposes and marketing the community to help us rebuild. But I do have friends and co-workers that have been heavily impacted by this flood, and let's face it, everybody in the community has been impacted by this flood, and everybody in the boundary for that matter. This is an event we will possibly never see again, possibly will see again. It's been a challenge for everybody. One of my friends' homes is directly in the path of where the dike is supposed to be built. I've heard their stories. The trouble they've had with insurances, trying to sort out where to live for months, trying to find a rental home, living in a trailer, trying to buy a lot to move their house onto, then finding out that doesn't work, buying another house to figure out where they can move to. I feel for everyone here. I have to be blunt though. From our side, it doesn't look, we are not optimistic that we will receive the pre-flood values for the necessary buyouts. I hear and see your worries and fears. And although I can't take them all away, I can guarantee that the council and city staff are trying everything possible to leverage our funding partners for flexibility within any agreements, as Mayor Taylor already mentioned, regarding how to use the funds in a creative way to achieve a better solution for everyone. Some of the options the city and the BFR team are coming up with right now are looking very promising to gain that support. And now I'm going to hand it over to Graham Watt, the recovery manager, to walk you through some of those. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. All right, so Josh, we'll just go from there. So tonight we've had the intro. There's a couple of Q&A things that I've heard a couple things recently which I wanted to clear up right away before we got into the main part of the presentation. And then I'm going to go through what was presented to council on August, I think it was 12th? Yeah, August 12th, the last council meeting, with some additional information. I posted a slightly earlier version of this presentation on the website, on the BFR website. I'll update with the one that you have before you tonight for anyone who wants to take notes. There are lots of words on some of the slides, so definitely encourage you to download it or look at it again, or look at Les's video. Thank you, Les. We'll talk a little bit about what we heard from residents so far and talk about the next steps in terms of hearing from the entire residential community involved here, the process for hiring the land acquisition team, when things can start for those who need them to get started as soon as possible. There's a spectrum, of course. We've heard from people who want to get things going right away, and we've heard from people that want to make it as long as possible. And so we're trying to have a land acquisition team that can deal with all parts of that spectrum. So we'll talk about that tonight. And finally, a few words just on the case management, the ongoing role, and where Boundary Family Services is at. Next, please. All right, so these are ones that we will try to answer questions that come along. We'll get these up on the website as well for the Q&A. But I've heard this a number of times. Will the DFA payout reduce my compensation from the buyout? Because we keep on talking about DFA, we're trying to put it from a perspective as here's a data point for where people might be at after the flood. And we know some people used it on their homes, and other people maybe used it to buy an RV to live in for the winter. Other people needed to just survive until other means came in. So there's a really wide variety of options that people actually had and the choices they were able to make, but it is a starting point. The government has told us that they don't want to see a double dipping or a overuse of funds where people might be able to get, have used the DFA to reduce the debt load and then get on top of that a full pre-flood buyout. That they told us they're concerned about that. What I want to recognize is what we're concerned about is people having a viable option after the buyout is done. So how do we actually get there? So we'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to achieve.
I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely, in 1 second.
I have a question
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
This DFA money was not a gift.
It's not a gift, no, nor was the insurance.
I was assessed at $76,000 worth of damage to my home, and I got $56,000 from them to fix my house back to the way it was prior to the flood.
Yeah.
So where am I double dipping?
No,
You start using words like this and it really pisses me off because that money was not a gift to us to benefit from. It's for us to survive, to get us back in our homes. So when you start talking about double dipping, who's saying double dipping? And I would like them to come to my house and live in my house for a goddamn week, okay? And see what we go through. And everybody here has gone through the same goddamn thing.
Graham!
I'm getting sick and tired of you guys standing up there.
Graham, I talked to you 2 or 3 times about this. If we are given DFA money, is it part of a buyout? And you said
Totally separate. That's what
totally
I said
separate.
again.
Then
That's
why
what-
mention it?
Yeah, so why bring it up and say that people are talking about us double dipping?
Because this is a question that came to me.
From who?
This came to me from a provincial politician
Okay,
who's
come
heard it
down to
from
my house.
who's heard it from
Come
people.
down here,
Okay.
Rocco, and sit
Okay.
with me.
So I want.
Who the hell are you representing?
All right. So I'd like to take a deep breath here, and I recognize that. So I recognize that this is a scary thing for people to hear the idea, and so I'm putting it up there. There is no ability to reduce your payout based on DFA. It has nothing to do with each
Then why
other.
mention it?
Because it's brought up to us as a concern, and we wanted to
Been
say it
mentioned in
again.
other parts of it too.
Okay.
Why mention it?
Well, I'm not trying to stick my foot in my mouth here. I'm trying to feedback based on what we've heard and trying to provide clarity on
You've
stuff.
listened to the other side. Have you really listened to us? Have you listened to what we've gone through? Okay? Like, you talked, last meeting I was at with you, when we talked about this and the in-kind stuff and whatever, you talked about double dipping, okay? Right now, the way it stands, I've lost probably $80,000 worth of stuff around my home that will never be replaced because I wasn't covered for insurance, I wasn't covered for DFA, and you guys are just talking nonsense about this. So how am I going to double dip unless you guys give me $500,000 in cash?
So
This is what's pissing me off so much, and a lot of these people in here have the same bloody concerns. I'm just gutsy enough to mention it.
So, you know what? I know I'm glad to hear what you say, and that message is really, really important. Okay, that all people concerned with the funding that we're getting hear that message.
Yeah.
I'm saying what I've heard, and I'm saying what our knowledge is. If there's people concerned that people are getting too much from a provincial funding perspective, they need to hear about that concern, right? So your anger is valid. Your point that you made is received, and I heard this. I've heard this very much. So
It's considered too much though, Graham. Like, for example, if a house is worth $400,000 10 years ago, a person works hard, pays that off in 10 years, and then they're giving, I don't know, $250,000 in return for their damaged home. Is that considered too much? No, because that person just worked their ass off to pay it off in the first place. So how is that benefiting them or making them profitable on top? You know what I mean? Because they're not being profitable, because you have to look at the big picture, not just that day. You have to look at what's happened over the whole time in that place.
Also, another thing I gotta bring up is we started this meeting with the same bullshit I listened to for other meetings. Is you guys get up on the stage, you pat yourselves on the back on a job well done for the last 15 months.
15.
I asked you a question at the last meeting, that over the last 15 months, how much planning have you done for rebuilding dikes, looking after Ruckle, turning it into a flood space, okay? And do you know what you told me? You've done absolutely nothing in that direction for 15 months. So now, how can you guys pat yourselves on the back for a job well done when you haven't done a goddamn thing?
Not for us residents, for sure.
I think I hear a lot of anger here. And you know what? I come here in good faith to hear from you. No, listen. And
Stop it.
please,
Respect that, please.
please,
Everybody sit
everybody,
down.
please sit down.
Including the mayor and the council.
Sit
Please sit
down.
down. Everybody stay seated. Everybody stay
You know,
seated.
I know you're frustrated, and so does council, and so decision makers. We're trying to find a path forward. You're upset about many different things that have happened. You've expressed your anger publicly in the community, at these meetings. It hasn't fixed things to hear anger. We're working on solutions, okay? I know you're angry. I know about it. I like Daniel expressed, I have friends, neighbors, loved ones who are massively impacted by this. And I know that council feels the weight of the decisions very, very well, right? So when we're talking about what's been done,
What decision?
I think that you maybe mischaracterized what I said about nothing being done, because there were preliminary plans done. There is extensive analysis done on options. There was, a lot of preliminary engineering analysis. The question on what wasn't able to be done was the housing options. We had requested funding. We did not get that funding for doing this next stage housing options, and so we were having to play catch up on housing options. That's what I was expressing.
Okay, so you have everything in place to start building dikes.
You know what? It still takes a year to 2 years before dikes can actually be built.
15 months.
Right.
After funding is obtained, it takes a couple of years to go. You're frustrated with the slow,
These dikes should have been done 30 years ago.
Okay.
The planning should have been done. So if we get the money, now we can go move ahead and do this, okay?
Thank you.
So you haven't done anything for the last 15 months or the last 30 years to do the dikes.
I'll
Let's
wear
stay
that, especially the stuff from 30
Can we
years ago.
stay focused
So,
and move on?
All right,
Thanks.
I'm going to move on now because I can feel myself getting a rise up here, and
Can I just ask you a clarification? I'm not arguing with you. I just want, while we're on the DFA topic here, I'm just wondering if you can give some clarification on who in the province is questioning and using terms like double dipping. We would just like to get clarity on who it is in the province we need to be expressing this message to directly, so that you're not always the go-between.
so, and you know what, I haven't heard it directly from the people, the origin. I hear it from people who have heard it from people who say this is a concern. So no one has come out and said, this is the problem.
Okay, so
Okay, and you know what? I'm not going to ask for a do-over because we're already here and it's on camera. But I'd love to go to the next set of questions and move on because there is a lot of good work that's happening, and I also want to recognize there's people I've talked to in this room who are really hoping that some of these solutions are going to work for them. And so if we can move forward and look at solutions and trying to figure it out from there. And you know what? I'm sorry for people who are leaving tonight as well, who feel frustrated by this start of the meeting. So we have not received any of the funding from the 53 million. It's reimbursement based, which means the city has to hire people, spend money, and then submit for reimbursement. So we're not earning interest on it. There's no money in the bank for it. Thirdly, I've heard from several people, can we get our appraisal and start right now? There's people who are overextended and are looking to try to, basically be able to finalize their next options. We're working on options on there, but I think that we're probably not able to move forward on that until we have the contribution agreement. We're aiming for the beginning of October for that, and then the appraisal team would be actually able to start on the next phase.
What is the agreement?
what's the agreement?
Oh, sure, I'll specify that. So what we have received so far is a conditional letter that says, yes, you're going to receive this funding, but first you have to have an agreement with the funders, how you're going to spend it, when you're going to spend it, and how you're going to report on your spending so we can track all the money. So that's like a big, thick document called a contribution agreement, and we can't get reimbursed for anything until that's actually been signed off by everyone in charge.
Is negotiable, that agreement?
There's terms in it that have to be negotiated. Things like the exact appraisal method, perhaps, or cash flow, or different things like that. But mostly it's like a technical, legal agreement between the federal government and the city, the province and the city, and then also the city and the regional district for where we're sharing projects. So I've seen only parts of it so far. It's going back and forth between provincial lawyers and everything right now, so it's in process. We're hoping to get there for the beginning of October.
So who here legally represents the city?
Right there.
Only one hand?
Actually, there's more council.
Two hands.
So Graham, who is it that will be, when you submit it,
Yeah.
who is it that's signing?
So it'd be signed off by likely the minister responsible for the funding, so Mr. Farnworth provincially and Champagne federally. Well, depending on the timing of the agreement, I suppose it might be after the writs drop, so we might have to wait.
Say that again, it would be.
The writ, there's an election this fall, and that's on the 21st of October, I think. So anyways, there will be someone signing for the government. I'm not sure after the writ is dropped, it means that somebody who's representing they're in an election race, so they're no longer actually representing the ministry or that kind of thing. So at some point, there will be those pieces signed. But I'm hoping at the beginning of October is what my understanding is. Yeah. Yes. Please.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention too that for us, it's finding $3.5 million within the finances of the city to participate in the plan, in the EMAP plan. That's what we're, at this point in time, having to sign off on and find ways of, no, I think it's good.
We can't hear you.
It might help.
Can't hear me. Is that better?
Yeah.
So yes, the city has to find $3.5 million of money without raising taxes. That's the challenge that city council faces.
Yeah, you had exactly. Great point.
I feel like I'm just kind of stepping in everything first. Maybe that's the wrong way to start off. But please bear with me. Why do you need to hire more professionals first? Why can't you just get the money flowing to us who are affected? That's questions come up a couple of times. A big one is that the city and the RDKB are not experts in property law, in doing real estate transactions, in dealing with the agreements that need to be made between the city and all of you, or the regional district if you're one of those properties. And the independence and professionalism is really important, because that is an independent document that has to stand up for a lot of reasons. So it's basically a professional appraisal is what's required. So for them to be able to carry all that out, that also means that it's not one of us who's actually part of the community who are there doing this business with you, right? They're on that middle ground, and you're not worried about the bias of potentially of someone who's doing the city's business on it. So it's an important question for that independence, and it takes a little bit of time to get the team in place. We're working on that right now, and we'll keep you updated as soon as they're ready to go. We'll have an invitation for people to make contact and start the process as they're ready.
Which types of professionals are you hiring?
So it's if you look at it, a land acquisition team would include appraisal professionals, lawyers, and realty people would all be involved. And then there's two parts to it. There's kind of the appraisal and negotiation, finding agreement, and then there's the papering, right? There's the notarizing or whatever needs to be done at the end of it.
The funding agreement, are you referring to the agreement that would be between the city and the people, or the city?
Yeah, city and individuals, that's right. Yeah, so there's an agreement that would happen for that.
Will they know what the post-flood amount was that we were approved for? Could this go over, or
you know, it's going to reflect current market value. Regardless, what happened for Christmas was a very fast appraisal in order to get a good idea as a whole how much money to ask for. But they went really quick. They didn't get to every house in person. Some were drive-bys. So they need, you know, the appraisal team that will be hired has to actually go and in some ways start fresh. They can potentially build on some of the knowledge about, you know, communication or whatever, but yeah.
And if it goes over, it doesn't...
If it goes over its current market value, yeah.
So
yeah.
I reiterate, I've had that question a bunch of times. If our appraisals come in over the 14.3 whatever,
right,
can you access more funds?
You know, that's a really, so what we're requesting of the province is the ability to request more funds. The other piece that we would need to look at is the use of city land as part of consideration for the total pot. So if somebody were able to get city land as part of their payment, if their value is higher, then that's actually something that we have to look at.
So that money you save from that would go to upping other people's properties?
That's one of the questions that we're asking of our design team to consider, right? Like it's that we know that's an issue. If everything comes higher than the budget that we put in, then we got to find a place for the resources, and hopefully we'll have provincial support on that.
Graham, you talked about not understanding or not knowing or maybe having to wait. I understand that this has happened in several other provinces. Really, there's something. Federal government has already put a lot of money and legwork into, as well as these other provinces. Can't we glean from there without starting over for BC?
That's a really excellent question, Mel. I appreciate that. I've heard from others across Canada who have dealt with this challenge. Every jurisdiction is different, and the timing of buyouts is different, but some, like you say, have received pre-flood value even in a mitigation project down the road after a period of time. Others got it right after the flood, so the context depends. I haven't heard a good answer on it yet. So,
is it public record to know how much you and your team is being paid?
Come on.
You know what? Through what is it called? No, not FOI. There's a financial administrative reporting that happens. Yes, it's public record to the extent of there's legislative requirements reporting on it.
For a year and a half, we need to know.
You You know, I think there's going to be absolutely some budget reports available on everything. That's not what we're here about
No,
tonight. And
I think you should send it.
and I also don't have that information in hand. So, anyways, next slide, please.
Please. Just could I ask one more question?
Sure.
I'm just wondering, are you selling any of your lots right now if you're so strapped for money? Are those lots for sale? Those city lots that you own?
Our intent would actually be to service them and make them available as service lots before selling anything. So we actually have to invest money in order to make it saleable. The city lots, as they are, there's not necessarily road service to them, sewer, water, that kind of thing. And typically the lots that are empty in town right now are ones that don't have services to them. So we need to go through a step first. Part of it is to know how many people are going to need a lot, and can we make that part of the transaction. In the past, the city actually has sold land directly to developers, and it hasn't necessarily been of great benefit to the city to do that, as a ability to get cash. So treading carefully. All right, so we're there. So the primary goal is on affordable and attainable housing, and that means that we're actually really concerned that people have the means to get into something new, and we've heard from you about the fear that you will not have something that you can replace with. So that's the council is committed on that role to work on this. Next one. This one was discussed in July and again in August, the principle of fairness and being careful not to provide a lift. And what that means is that if somebody made another option and an in-kind property wasn't available to them, then they would get less than, say, somebody who might have gotten a land trade as part of their deal and gotten some of a lift. So how can we provide something attainable without actually being different in the benefit that's available to people? So it's a consideration for the buyout team, basically, to help make sure this is a really fair process, and also help make sure there's as much money available as possible for everyone. Next. The investment question, you asked about selling city land first or maybe doing servicing first. So anytime we extend services, we not only pay for it now, we also pay for it again in 30 to 50 years when we have to replace it. And so if we do something that over its life cycle, and a classic example is a suburb on a hill, they end up costing a lot of money over time, more than their tax revenue will ever generate. So part of the question of where to put stuff is making sure that there's a good asset management. The assets in the ground have the ability to be paid over time. There's also good sites where if we put something out there, other people might be able to tie into it and help pay for it. So be able to pass the costs on to others. Capacity, this is a constant challenge. Everyone I know in the city has got a to-do list or one of those timeline Gantt charts that stretch multiple pages. And so we need additional help to make this happen. And I know some of you, you questioned when Daniel, gave kudos to the team, but I actually want to recognize that people have leaned in incredibly hard to try to find solutions and put their own health on the line. And we've got to make sure that we don't burn ourselves out, that we can do what's within capacity. Sometimes that means it takes a little bit longer. I'd rather get it right, understand the problems well before we jump into things, but also move as fast as we can. So that's part of our issue there. Okay.
Year and a half?
Thank you. Okay, so a month ago, basically, over a 2 to 3 week period, we had 5 meetings over 2 weeks. Not 60 different individuals, but 60 attendees at meetings came. I think it was about 45 total. And there was positive dialogue in each of the meetings about exploring the options. And what we heard loud and clear, and we've heard it again, with the petition that's going around, the letter to council, that continue to advocate for additional funds. That message has been heard really hard, and it's something that continues to be a dialogue. There's a really strong interest from you in retaining land ownership. People were concerned that leasing didn't provide them the flexibility that they had before. And so this was, something important for us to hear. We also did have some dialogue with people who, on thinking about leasing, saw that it might be a viable option. So there's a couple of case studies later on drawn on a couple of examples from we had out there to talk about how it might work for different examples and what options it might make available. Some people asked about, could they go and purchase their own lot and then get some in-kind from the city? That actually makes it harder and costlier on a per lot basis. So if we can lump them into larger projects and do multiple properties at once, it'll help us out a lot. And the question of, can the city own part of the lot until it's sold down the road to make it so people can have all of their funding? That's something that people have asked about. We've wanted to explore it. We need to study it some more. So the land acquisition team and the funders will need to agree to the buyout of the design of the buyout, but the use of city land or servicing support is there to basically help make an financially acceptable future outside of the buyout area. So it would be part of the consideration that you grapple with as part of your coming to an agreement. Okay, so next.
Sorry, Graham, what was that last statement again?
The last statement is, it'll be part of the negotiations. So the city, in addition to X current market value or current market value plus or whatever it is that we're allowed to say, spend the money on, then the other part of the agreement is in kind, what can the city do to help make this viable? And that would be part of the discussion of the agreement.
The agreement between the
city and the individuals. Yeah. All right. So one of the options, Darren, maybe you mentioned about 20 or so people at the meeting initially, or about a third of people who are applying for 19th Street were flood affected or in the bad area? Yeah, approximately. So there are some people who were renters at the time of the flood who have had lots of upsets since then in finding secure places, and some homeowners who are looking at rental as a viable option. And so that process is continuing, and Boundary Family Services is a key contact for the BC Housing intake process there.
Are you saying that 19 homeowners applied to BC Housing? Or
19th Street Place, a portion of the people coming to the meeting were from the flood affected area. Some of those are renters and some of those are homeowners. Okay. I don't have the exact numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then there's a council was it in August, Daniel, that council voted for the waiving of fees for development permits. Last meeting, yeah. So staff had recommended, it's already allowable in zoning to have a house with an additional suite in it as well as one in the backyard. There's a development permit process that has to happen for it, and now that process is made more streamlined, and the fees for those backyard suites for development permit fees and building permit fees are waived for the next 2 years. So anybody who has a property that would be eligible for an additional suite can actually have less startup fees and a faster process. So there's already one in the queue for a new home that has a suite and a garden suite in it. And the idea, since before the flood, was to try to make more rental pool available across the city. Next slide. So land lease and servicing support, I'll go through a kind of a case study example, and we'll do it slowly. I'll have to do it twice if I need to, because I've heard lots of feedback on these, and make them understandable, Graham, is what I've heard. So if the city can do things like servicing sites for manufactured homes or moving a house onto, and then also being able to pay for the servicing those over a long time period, and that would be the total cost of the lease is actually having the payment for those services, then individuals would be able to use the entirety of their buyout value for actually being able to afford the dwelling in the new location, not paying for land costs and paying for servicing over time. So there's two ways to do that. One is through a service-only fee, so they'll get a service-only fee. And the other way is through equity ownership, where just the market value of the property is retained by the city until you eventually sell it. So there's a way that that would mean you wouldn't get actually a lift, but you'd get access to land. But go ahead with your question.
In kind. What is your definition?
It's non-financial is the definition. So various ways of, moving a house, doing servicing, providing access to land.
Okay. So in-kind support, land lease. Now, I already own my land, I already own my services, I already own my crawl space, and I already own my house. I still have a mortgage on it, but it's mine, okay? So if I move my home to another piece of land, why would I have to lease the land, lease the services? That is a monetary value. That is outside of in-kind. In-kind is a barter system. I give you something, you give me something back, no money changes hands. So why am I going to spend the next 30 years of my life leasing a piece of land from you, okay, when I already own my land? All right? This is the problem that's come in, is that you guys keep talking about how you're going to help us out to a point, but why am I still having to pay you for a piece of land I already own?
So let's say as an example, person A here has the ability with their own resources and the amount from the buyout to buy their own property and either move their house to it, etc. So they would be of their own resources getting that, the new lot, including from the buyout value. Let's say person B didn't have enough resources from that. Maybe they owed more money or didn't have, like you say, mortgage or whatever else, and didn't after the buyout have enough to actually buy a lot. So when we go back to the fairness question, would it be fair for the city to give person B a lot and not person A, just because person A happened to have some resources to buy one themselves? So that's...
This goes back to somebody that said they worked hard all their life to pay off their home, okay? There's probably some millionaires in this room that can afford to go out and buy a house tomorrow. Not even think twice about it. But it's not the point. It's what they're losing on the house they've been living in for some people the last 40 and 50 years. You guys are chopping our heads off, okay? I stand to lose, from what you guys are telling me my house is worth today, I stand to lose $75,000 over what it was worth last year, okay? I put a new roof on my house, I put new windows in my house, I put new doors on my house, I had hardwood flooring in my home. We were upgrading our house, we had no plans on selling it. Today, I've now had to rebuild my house with DFA money, but that's not a gift, that is just replacement, okay? But now I've gone to laminate flooring, cheaper stuff in my home. I have drywall up with no tape, no mud, no paint, no trim, no nothing, okay? So, all I want to come out of this with is what I had 15 months ago, okay? So, like I said, whether a person can go out and buy their own home tomorrow, they worked hard for that money. That's their retirement money. Why are they having to go buy another home, all right? And then you say for the people that don't have the money, you're going to give them a piece of property, okay? Because they can't afford to buy that piece of property. I already have it. I live on it, okay? So just give me, I live on a 90 by 120 lot. You give me a piece of 190 by 120 lot. You run the services to my crawl space, you put my crawl space in, and we move the house over, we're done, okay? No money has changed hands. Yes, it's cost you some money to do so, all right? But you're leaving us out in the back 40. I've heard rumors over the last 3 weeks. We chose to live in the floodplain. Floodplain in Grand Forks reaches from Christina Lake to Spencer. Okay, we all live in it. People say that it's the, how do we put it? The poor people live in Rocco.
That's right.
Okay? We have a home just 3 houses down from us, it's worth over $1 million.
Yeah.
There's another one down the street from me, $650,000. There's people in Valmar don't even have that. Their house is worth $300,000, maybe $400,000. We've got some expensive homes, and yes, we've got some not so expensive homes in our home, in our area. But we chose to live there. We are a community. We all like each other, okay? But you're treating us like lepers.
Yep.
All right? And we're gonna get screwed. For me to go take what you're offering me, and I have to go anywhere else in town and buy a home that's the same as what I have, I now have to spend $350,000, but you're only gonna give me $175,000. So now I gotta come up with another $175,000. I'm 63 goddamn years old. I wanted to retire in 2 years. I now have to work for 20 years to pay for the shit that you're gonna give to me in kind. And I don't know about everybody else here on how you feel, but I think we've all got about the same as what I feel. Do you guys want to retire with no money because the city is now taking away from what we work for? Okay, I'm not a millionaire.
So thank you.
But I was comfortable in my home. And I'm not comfortable in my home anymore. Okay? You guys talk about how, all the work you guys have done. I appreciate that. But do you really know what we've gone through? The turmoil we go through every day? We look at our homes that are derelict. One across the street from me has been gutted for 15 months. They don't even live in it. Okay? Do you really know how we feel? And then, like I said,
no idea.
when I listen to you guys stand up there and tell me how well of a job you've done and build yourselves up, why aren't you building us up? We deserve it. We're the ones that are suffering here, not you guys.
So thank you so much for sharing what we did. Two things. One is a proposed solution, right? So what you identified was having the swap of land as part of the consideration to make it viable. That's like having land itself as part of the package. That's what I heard is make that and try to find a way to make that
That
work.
word lease,
Yeah.
because that tells me I gotta pay you.
I have a question for you. How much luck would you have to tell the rest of the people in town that have either sold their house or selling it that their land value is being frozen because we might need to be moved over there? There ain't a chance in hell. But because we live in Ruckle, we're considered, as he said, maybe second or third rate, we're expected to let you or the government steal our land and give us a piece of crap that we gotta pay for again. I don't own any money. Now be damned if I'm leaving alive with a bill. So you guys figure it out. You want my land? Trade me something that I can live with.
And that's kind of what I meant for him by being profitable. The fact that, like himself, for a fellow that's worked to a point where he doesn't owe money on it anymore, does that mean that he's not entitled to what the market value of that house was prior to this flood, right? I mean, because does that make him profitable that he has, let's say, $200,000 in his pocket? No, it doesn't, right? Because he's already paid that money over his time, probably more than once. Most people remortgage, or whatever the case may be, whatever, that's all hypothetical. I'm just saying, you keep saying that the government is telling you guys, we don't want anyone to be profitable. Well, what's considered profitable? You know? The fact that people might have $20,000 or $50,000 in their bank on top of what they've owed on it, well, that's not considered profitable because they've already put that money into that place and they've worked hard to pay that off. And you still gotta find a place, like he said, you gotta find a place to live. I'm fortunate enough that I'm young, I gotta be able to bounce back. Unfortunately, a lot of these people are at a retirement age now or getting close to it, where that 50 grand or whatever that they may receive that may be profitable in the government's eyes is no good to them. So that's kind of what I was trying to do. I wasn't trying to start a fight, but that's what I was trying to get.
That's a really
Do
good
you
point.
remember when the native Indians and the Japanese were moved?
I see where you're going, and I also want to.
Really?
No, I see where you're going.
Really?
I just want to recognize that I have seen from the colleagues and decision makers who have talked to me about this, I've never seen a disparaging remark towards anyone in North Ruckle saying what you're accusing us of saying. And I just want to say this.
A year and a half, you have lied, you have changed your ways, you have told us all kinds
I'd like you to stop speaking right now, please, and otherwise I'm going to have to request that you leave. There are people leaving right now, because of the language you're using. And I'm not going to accept any more interruptions, okay?
Okay, I'll be.
I'm happy for you to hear, and I appreciate you're upset. But when you accuse people of lying, it's only hurting everybody, okay?
No, but you have.
So,
Okay, Graham, can I just ask for some clarification on that? Take some deep breaths. This is not going to be a tough one, I promise.
sure.
So, I think this goes to sort of the heart of the fairness issue, and that's, I understand that you guys are attempting to be fair. But fair for me, for example, I own my home. I have a piece of land, I own my home, and I know a lot of people here have some debt, so I'm in a different position, but I saved up, I bought a home that I could afford without debt. And this buyout process, there's no way I can buy a property without going into debt. So what would be fair to me would be land for land, a land swap. So put me on a piece of land without making me lease it or pay for it. So that's what's fair. I think people want what they have replaced. They're not looking for cash. They're looking for, they live on a home, they live on a piece of land, they own it one way or the other. They want another piece of land and a home to live on without having to get into more debt. So they want replacement of what they have, and that's a home and a piece of land. So that's fairness in our eyes.
Thank you. So this is a policy decision this would be a policy decision of council to consider to do that and how to do it. I think they've heard this request loud and clear, and if any of them wants to speak and reflect on it after we're done the discussion, I totally welcome that. And so I just want to recognize working within the parameters, the policy things given, this is what we have to start with. And how would land for land be part of a fair deal? That's the question that we have to go back, consider, and come up with an answer. So we'll work on that.
Thank you.
How long would it take to get that answer?
You know, I don't know until I think we get feedback from the land acquisition and appraisal team who's helping with the design. I think it could be part of their proposal of how to have a solution on this. We need some expertise, but the willingness to consider it in the request is noted. So it's a question of, that we're trying to find solutions. We need that expert input within the parameters that council sets. And if something isn't viable for people, and that's why I appreciate the feedback that we're hearing tonight, it sounds like what we have here is not viable enough yet without thinking about the land value as well. So how do we use that as part of things? So that's what we have to go back and study. All right, next slide please. That's too small. I did want to think about someone who had a position of debt and a low value after the property. How can they get into something that is viable? And is there a way of providing city land, access to land or property itself, and paying for the servicing over a long period of time? And the example that we looked at is of a modest, compact manufactured home of the 800 square foot, 1,000 square foot style, and basically adding at the worst case scenario land servicing cost of $30,000, and then the remainder, half the home value of say $45,000 to $50,000 for a $100,000 home. The payments that people might have remaining would actually be less than the cost of rent of an example of a basement suite. So there's an example there where within the constraints of providing no lift and no additional funding, somebody could have a viable option in the future. So, go ahead. You had a question?
What about people that still owe mortgages and the payout is not nearly enough to pay off the mortgage? Are they going to continue on owing mortgage payments to a piece of land?
Can't hear you.
And then also try and pay a lease on a piece of city land?
I'll repeat that question. So that's a concern that we've had because the mortgage holders also want to be paid if there's a closure of that thing. So one question that we're trying to follow up in, is there a way to port the debt and have all else equal so that there isn't more debt arising? Is there a way that they could continue paying into it as part of a new dwelling? You know, some of the mortgage holders have started to talk to us like, you know, how is this going to work? So we're going to need their assistance in figuring out a solution. If mortgage holders can't, then we might have to look at some other kind of alternative form of security on it. But land itself could be equity, as an example, offered to help make something that the bank might be interested in having. That's the thing, if somebody had a mortgage before, if they're getting a new dwelling as part of it, I don't see a way that they wouldn't necessarily have a same mortgage, but the idea is to not make them have more mortgage. I think that's been heard loud and clear. It depends on the total value of what's there. And if someone downsizes and has, you know, something that is affordable, maybe they can get out of it with less. But I don't think there's going to be a chance where we could pay off the mortgage and, yeah.
So if their payout is still less, like say they owe over $100,000 on the mortgage, $120,000, they get $30,000 for the payout. That $30,000 most likely is going to go straight to that mortgage. So they don't actually have a payout, they just have a little less of a mortgage, but still.
The land.
The land, so now they don't have a house.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard that problem loud and clear, so we're looking for a solution. Yeah. Okay. Next one. We've talked a little bit about this. Just moving houses is going to be viable for some homes and not others. And wherever possible, having homes not end up in the landfill and also be available for salvage, that's the best possible outcome. It also means that, next slide, if somebody can keep their home, is there a way that instead of going to the landfill, is it make it so there's more money available overall for the financial part of the payout? So this is part of the buyout design question that we're asking the company coming in to consider. How do you treat this question of a home being moved as part of the scenario? Some people have said, we want to keep our home, we think it's movable, how does this work? Other people have said, we can't keep our home, but we want to salvage it. Other people have said, we're ready to walk away, but it might be usable for someone else. So how do those different ones get treated? We're going to get input on that design. How is it possible that maybe more total payout is available for their financial bottom line? Next one. I think we've kind of covered this one. But just the question of spreading costs over time and having something that you own the improvements on the asset and can sell that in the future as you need. Okay, next one. So there's a couple of interesting prospects that probably will take a year or so to develop, but partnerships with developers, with nonprofits involved in housing, and some others who are interested in this question would like to get involved. And it's a matter of kind of making that partnership with the city where we could use city land and pass the savings on to people who would be occupying that. So we've heard from some people they'd really like to downsize to something either like Clifton Estates or Moody Estates or something similar, a compact form with just a little bit elbow room compared to the acre. So we really want to see if this is viable. We're starting to get a little bit of interest, but we're going to be working with the development side of the community to see where this one can go. The reality is we haven't had very much market-led development in the last 50 years since the couple of condos downtown, and people can make more money in the Okanagan developing new multifamily and that kind of thing. So can the city do anything to help make it move? Next one. And that's just kind of a scenario based on that question, so the Clifton Estates example. next one.
Yeah, I think the city could do a lot for that. They could provide some sort of incentives to bring the market to us. It can be based a lot on what the city and the RDKB are choosing to do. And I think that's a really good thing for them to be doing, is incentives for multi-unit housing units.
Or even developers, right? Any kind of place, even if it's a single house lot, neighborhood.
Yeah.
Get developers.
Yeah, we do have some privately held larger lots where if the city partnered on servicing, it would actually make it viable for them to develop single-family lots, and maybe those could be used for moving houses onto or building new ones. So we're trying to explore those things. It takes a little bit longer, but also the overall timeline is that, for almost all areas, except where there's a high priority infrastructure needed, almost all areas have a couple of years before the land is needed for the floodplain restoration. It's towards the end of the project. So we're trying to make sure there's time for a viable solution for those who are staying longer, and meanwhile being flexible for those who go earlier. So the timeline here, right now we're still in that design phase. We'll be accepting proposals from the teams over the next few weeks here. That's that procurement, and then they're aimed to be in place by later in September.
Proposals from which teams?
The acquisition team, the appraisal and legal team that is going to do the buyouts.
So you're accepting bids from for companies to
Yes.
get those positions?
Yeah, we're going to be putting that out, I'm hoping, on Tuesday. Just been a lot of back and forth with making sure we get this request for proposal right, but we're very, very close. And then the preparation phase is basically starting with the feedback that is heard here about what is acceptable as part of options for people, what kind of things should be on the table. And that helps inform, what's going to be a successful buyout. Do we have enough resources for it? Do we need to, how much additional is needed? What's viable? And hearing from Daniel's perspective there, what is viable? So we don't have all those answers right now.
Is there even enough stuff around to move everybody out of North Rockville?
The quick answer is yes. And we're just not sure on the numbers yet, because some people have moved on, some people want to downsize, and other people want the single-family lot. So part of our work over the next period of time, and working with caseworkers actually, is to work on the housing plan going forward, on what you want, and is it something that, if everybody wanted a single family lot, then we're just going to have to open up more land, and we might need to partner with a developer. If half the people don't want that single family lot, then it is a different planning option. So
That's going to affect the real estate market in this town.
Absolutely.
So you're going to have a lot of pissed off people out here.
So the idea is to replace the number of lots that are being lost with new service lots and new dwellings.
Right.
So that's basically not having that impact. There's no way the city can accommodate that many new homeowners.
Houses up for sale or anything like that, it would suffer in that scenario.
It's one of the complexities in the market. Appreciate that. There's a lot of places that just went up for sale in the last couple of months.
Oh, yeah, and they're quite high prices.
Yeah. So current market valuation, the appraisal team would go, what is it worth right now? Oh, sorry, you had a question.
Are you going to be contacting every landowner, like individually with a set of questions or something, so you can get some specific feedback from each? Like not just from these meetings, but we each have an opportunity to give our specific.
Yeah, so the question is when to do it. I want to do a survey that you say, here's what I want on the table for when I go into my negotiation. There's a chicken and egg thing where council also needs to say what's on the table on that list. So I think that's the next thing that would have to happen.
And then with the appraisals, you may get this, so if you get this team together to do the appraisals, let's say the appraisals happen this fall, but some of us are going to be there for 2 years. Are we going to be stuck with the appraisal from this fall from 2 years from now? Or will it get appraised?
Yeah, we're definitely aware of that issue. There's implications for both way done, because if you have an early appraisal and then wait, in the location for a while, with the market have rebounded more, or you've done more to the house as an example, or if it is, there's impact. So that the team will propose some solutions on that question as part of the risk management. Flexibility is important, but I think if people feel comfortable in making an agreement early and choosing when they're able to move out. I've heard the question of someone who wants to buy a new modular, as an example. They need like 50% of that early on because they can't get 100% financing for it. So is there a way of having 50% early and 50% at the end? We need that input from the team. It's a good question.
Are you going to be able to remove the stigma of the flood area when these appraisers come in? Because the flood should have nothing to do with it, right?
That's a good question. So there was a flood stigma assumption made. There's very little market data after the flood. It always has to go on what current market value of the current land use is, as opposed to what it's going to be after the removal of the neighborhood.
So you can compare my say 4 lots and a 1,000 square foot house to 4 lots and a 1,000 square foot house somewhere else in Grand Forks, and they should be the same.
That, it depends on the data that the appraisal team have. We'll ask for that answer.
But there should be no stigma attached because of the flood.
That's a really good question.
Well, no, there shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be. But I can't answer to confirm that that's the case. Because it's
people who are going to be able to remove that stigma, whether it's through social media, press, or a policy, right?
So you'd like us to look at the stigma issue and make sure that's not a problem?
Yeah, maybe it's not part of it at all.
Yes, because the flood stigma percentage is a subjective number, and it's not a calculation that every appraiser uses the same way. So one appraiser might say flood stigma is 25%, another appraiser might say flood stigma is 5%, another appraiser might not take it into account at all. And of course, what we would prefer is it not being taken into account at all. I don't know what happened with the last appraisal. Why did they decide 25%, for example? How did they come to that number?
I'm not sure. They used some market data from comparable post-flood situations, and they said they expect it would change over time. So it's assumption that they basically made with unknown market data, but that's where that came in.
So that wasn't based on any instructions from the city or the province?
We're not experts on this, so.
But this was a choice of the city to acquire this land to save the downtown core and to make this city flood-proof, right?
There's several, and actually this is a really good question, there's several parts to the reason why North Ruckle or other areas are acquired. So one is that when you dike both sides of the river, the consequences are greater when it fails, and at some point in the future it will fail. The actual impact of a dike on either side of the river, upstream, downstream, that depends on the size of flood. It's only a small part of the overall equation. The other is the permanent reduction in risk of not having people located behind dikes on both sides of the floodplain.
The argument that our land is actually worth quite a bit more money to the city.
Well,
they needed to implement their plan.
So the future value of that ecological infrastructure, as they call it, or natural floodplain, is actually really high, right? And just like a park in the middle of the city is really high value. So I think it's something that we'll need that expert input on how, is that part of the calculation or not. There's laws that they have to fit in within. I don't even know what the CUSPAP thing stands for, but they're appraisal standards. They've got to meet that. And like you said, Jennifer, there's differences in how they treat it. They have to state the method they're using and say, here's how we made this assumption or that assumption, or whether we made an assumption. They state it in the methods, and then that's what we get. So that's a great question.
Will the appraisers be free to evaluate as they see fit, or are they going to be in some way instructed to keep within the budget that you have to finance this down? Because it is a question of, like, if they are trying to appraise higher, where is the appraisal coming from? is, it seems like there's money there for these other projects, but you basically have to get rid of those first. And so we thought it was simple. Okay, my question was, are they going to be instructed to appraise within that budget?
The instruction is for current market value and to have acceptable, an acceptable solution. And so, I hear where you're coming from on that. I think that the combination of possibility of using city land as part of the equation, the financial equation, if that can be used, or the request for additional resources from the funders, or a change in some other part of the overall funding, I think it matters. Is the difference 500,000 or 5 million really matters a lot, and so we'll need their appraisal values to know where that's landing.
So you can give them direction, like don't take the stigma into consideration. You can also give them direction to say there's 4 lots uptown.
That's a good question. I just want
to be the same amount of money. Actually, ours should be worth more. We got riverfront.
Yeah, and I want to be careful how I answer because I don't know. But it's
making a policy and the direction of the appraisers.
So your question is, can it be a direction to the appraisers to remove stigma and to consider all those values? So I think that's a question for us when we're talking about the proposal, the design from the appraisers. What can they take into account to make this acceptable?
Right.
And I'm be careful here because I'm so sincerely not an expert, and I know that over time, when there's uncertainty about something, you give an idea of how it could work out, and then it doesn't work out that way. I just want to make sure that we know that we're still before the design here. What these are is good questions about risk. It'd be a risk if a stigma value dropped the value too much and it wasn't, it removed even more value. That would be a risk, and how is that taken into account?
Right, and I really like to affect the rest of the real estate prices around the rest of the town.
Thanks, Les, for recording this because we'll just have the team watch the meeting.
Nobody's passing the microphone around. We won't be able to hear them.
Okay.
Oh, right.
Steve, I have a question for you. How come it's never mentioned that the whole town...
Can you give him a microphone, please?
Yes. Daniel's going to be a runner now.
The whole town's in the floodplain. When the water reaches the base of the swing set that I have along the river, you already got water coming up the backside of the fire hall.
Right.
And yet, the city being in the floodplain, we get isolated or we get separated or whatever you call it, to make people think that we are in the low areas and everybody else is better off. We're on the same level, and that city has been going up and down in the water table since the 1800s or earlier when they built it. And there's been water going up and down those big brick buildings. The only difference is 2 years ago the church got involved. Now I don't see the change. How come we're going to be the sacrificial lambs rather? I don't see any land being taken away from rock salt. That big fill they put in there that changed the way the river acts. And all of a sudden we got a gravel bar between my house and City Park, and nobody seems to think it's going to affect the river or the flow. How stupid can people be? You can put a big sump truck right out on the bank and suck the middle of that river out, put it in gravel trucks, and I understand washed sand is very valuable. Maybe we should be thinking of some of that rather than how to cut everybody's throat here.
Thank you, and I know a lot of options were analyzed by engineers to see what the effect of different things were. There actually have been several different firms involved, and will continue to be as the design goes forward, but thank you for sharing that. I think, next slide. We did talk about this, that survey, so you can say what your preference is, what your needs, etc. would be when that happens. That might be something that the appraisal team actually does. I'm not sure what it's probably better that they do it because we really don't have time. That's there. But the piece that we're working on, maybe if I could have Darren talk just briefly about what the I guess the role of case management and that individual recovery plan and how to build on that going forward make it possible.
Thanks, Graham. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Darren Pratt. I'm the Executive Director of Boundary Family Services, and I've been the team lead for wellness and unmet needs throughout this. The case managers have been working under our agency for the last 11 months? Yeah, about that. So I'll do a little bit of a preamble so there's some context and understanding. Case management is winding down, just like the other pillars have wound down. Dave moving back to the city, Emily moving back out of the housing pillar. Case management is winding down. So actually, tomorrow's the last full official day of the case management team as it exists moving forward. Rachel and I will be the last two standing. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Petra and Christopher and Tamika and Teresa for their time. It gets more difficult as it goes on because there's thoughts in community that somehow case managers and myself work for the city. We don't. We have been tasked with doing this pillar for the last year by Provincial Health Services. This is a wellness initiative. We actually have signed letters that I'm happy to provide from the city, from the RD, stating our neutrality. Case managers are not there to shill for the city. They're not there to push people into making decisions that they're not comfortable for. They are there to advocate, provide service delivery streams, and make sure that people have their needs for wellness met. That's their mandate, nothing more. So if anybody wants to see copies of those letters, please let me know. Moving forward, the mandate as it relates to housing will be individually meeting with those that request service from case management to put together a comprehensive individual recovery plan. That pertains to housing. So Nora, I'm going to throw you under the bus. So you meet with Rachel and you make it very clear that you and Dave want to have like land trade, perhaps one house is movable. You need this amount of equity. Rachel then puts that into your individual recovery plan and helps you figure out the best ways to move into negotiation with the city when the time comes. They're not there to tell you, you know what, the city's offering you this, go for it. They're there to listen to you and Dave to hear what it is that you expect out of this process. And if all of a sudden you say, you know what, I need expertise. Rachel, love you, but you don't know what we need to know. Her role is to find that professional or that paraprofessional who can point you in that direction. We understand how difficult this is, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and go outside of my scope of expertise and just share my perspective on systems. The city has been handed a tool, one tool, to build a house. They've been handed a screwdriver. The downflow from the province and from the feds have been very specific. You can do this, you can't do this. The Municipality Act is very clear in what you can and can't do around land use. So City Council and Graham and the rest of the team have to come up with some pretty creative ways to help meet some of the things that have been mentioned tonight. It's not easy. When I hear frustrations about 15 months in government world is a real blink of an eye to them.
When you're dealing with people's mental health and everything like that, 15 months is a long time. So.
Yeah, and how is this outside of your purview of expertise, and why are you speaking on this?
Because there's this piece of my case management team has borne the brunt of this frustration. My case managers who have gone in to try to support, who have tried to provide best clear pathways have been caught in between.
Nobody in
What I'm asking you is you,
dealt with 15 months.
what I'm asking you is you made a statement about systems, and you said I'm going outside my area of expertise, and you spoke about systems. Why did you decide to step outside of your area of expertise, and now you're talking about the caseworkers? So,
because there's been these misunderstandings of the role of case management, and they've borne the brunt of the frustration of not everybody, because some of the residents have been very understanding. But I think it's this place of realizing it's the shooting of the messenger, and not understanding that members of the case management team, if they had their magic wand, just like the managers of the BFR team, if they had their magic wand, it would have been different. But when they're handed a specific little tiny toolbox by agencies and mandates above them, that's what they have to work with.
But you are buffers.
See, this is what I'm saying. This is you stepping outside your area. Talking
Yep.
about the caseworkers, yes,
Yep.
that's within your purview.
Yep.
But that toolbox statement, I don't know exactly what you just said, but stepping outside that.
Yeah.
And so where, other than from caseworkers, where is the information coming from that why did you feel it necessary to say that the caseworkers weren't given a mandate from the city other than what you just stated? Like, where is that information coming from?
So we've had feedback in the community that case managers are working for the city, that's who's employing them, that they have a mandate to make this palatable to residents. Those are untrue statements.
But there might be some truth to those questions that are being asked.
Oh, there's always truth to questions, but are the answers true?
That's a good question.
Jordan, you wanted to ask something?
So you are a buffer between us and the city.
No, we are not buffers, advocates. We are not here, that's my point. My case managers are not here to buffer anything.
So then why are you complaining about people coming to you and you taking on the brunt of everybody's anger or sadness or whatever when that's your mandate?
And it's clarity in this. I'm not complaining. What I'm looking for is a little bit of empathy for the case managers. That's what it is. So if you want to be angry, it's okay to be angry, but just kind of understand who you're directing it at. That's what this is.
That's what we're looking for, is empathy.
Yeah.
You bet.
Okay.
You bet.
And we're not getting anywhere. Greg said we look at another 2 years down the road. The frustration in this room is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And in Ruckle is unbelievable, okay? And everybody keeps walking around saying, yes, we're working on this. Yes, we're working on this. And it's like, you know, we've now got the funds. Now we can move forward to do something. Well, like I said, in this town, there's been nobody looked at it 30 years ago that, well, maybe we should start looking at repairing the dikes, or maybe we should look at it. Like you said, the water's been coming up and down since the 1800s. It's not something that happened yesterday, okay? So why wouldn't you do a little bit of preventative medicine over the last 30 years? Oh, well, we don't want to raise taxes. Well, somebody went and told me that I had to pay an extra $50 a year so we can buy a goddamn fire truck, but never asked me if I wanted it. Okay? So why not do a little preemptive on our diking system? They all knew it wasn't up to snuff. Okay? So this is where the frustration comes in from me anyways, and I'm assuming it's from a lot of people, is now all of a sudden you guys are treating this like, son of a bitch, this just happened to us. You know, now we've got to do all this work. Why didn't you start doing it 30 or 40 or 50 years ago? Okay? This didn't just happen. It's been going to happen. And this is where our frustration comes in. Okay? So you talk about we should have empathy for you. Do you know what my stress level has been over the last year and a half? My blood pressure is now through the roof. I got to go see a doctor. I got to go on medication. I had none of those problems before all of this. So where's my empathy? Then you guys want to gut me for $100,000 so I can move to another part of this town. Where's the empathy? Do you understand this? This is the frustration that we're all feeling. And we're not really getting any answers for this. And it's like, well, we got to hire more people. We got to hire more people. Okay, where's the money coming from to pay these people? Now, if we go to build the dikes, what is there, $36 million allotted for diking? Somewhere's in that general area?
Diking and land restoration and all those functions, that's about right.
Whatever, and then there's $14 million for us in Rockland, or the buyouts, right? Okay, so $36 million. Since when have you ever heard of a government entity build anything under budget?
More on time.
Okay? So now let's say you got $36 million to do these dikes. At the end of it, it cost you $45 million. Where's the money going to come from? Answer me that question. You're going to borrow it. Because that money now got to be paid to the engineers and the contractors and everybody else, okay? But when it comes to the $14 million to buy us out, in order to acquire our land, You're going, well, wait a minute, we can't go over the 14 million. Why not? Just borrow the money. Because you're going to end up borrowing money by the time this whole thing gets settled anyways, and 2 years down the road. I'll bet you're into this thing for $55 to $60 million. But you're going to borrow the money to do it, and the taxes in this town are going to go up whether you like it or not. So why not help your fellow citizens at the same time? Why just kick us to the curb and say, well, we need your land because we want to flood it again next year in case the water comes up. But we don't really care about where you go or what you do or what's going to happen to you.
But we are last on the list.
Yes. You understand my question here now? We would like a little bit of empathy from your side of it also. I understand you guys got a job, but from what I understand, are you a volunteer?
No.
You get paid?
You get paid.
So technically you're doing your job.
I'm actually doing 2 jobs.
I don't care, but you're getting paid for your job, okay? So I should have empathy for you for doing your job.
Not for me. Not for me. I
For the
expect
project managers, or
for my case managers.
Case managers we get paid?
Yes.
Okay, so we should give them empathy for them doing their job. I should have empathy for Mr. Brian Taylor for doing his job. I should have empathy for anybody in this place for doing their job they're being paid to do.
But also understanding the power that they don't have. I think that was one, and perhaps empathy was the wrong word. Perhaps maybe understanding was a better word. And that was a misstep on my part. Empathy was the wrong word.
This is where we have the problem in here, is the misuse of certain words, okay? And then we go home. My wife phoned me the other day. I was out of town. She says, I heard something. She went online. She read all of this stuff. And she says, do you know what they're doing to us? In kind. They want to lease us land. In kind, like I said, is a barter system. Okay? But she's on there looking at this, freaking out. All right? Because there's certain words that are being used that just don't make sense. Okay? But
I'm sorry for the confusion that any of the...
It's big confusion.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the confusion that any of the words, the planning language, etc. works. Like, these are incredibly complicated topics that I haven't found a good way of explaining it better. And so I just want...
Managers had a hard time.
I'd like to apologize.
Not all.
When I came here tonight, my goal was to sit here and listen to you.
Not all of them.
I was not going to talk.
There was things that I...
But there are certain things that come up that just get me the wrong way, and yes, I go off on a tangent sometimes. And I apologize for this. But I'm going by how I feel and comments that I've gotten from a lot of the people in this room. Now, a lot of people in this room, they just don't want to be upfront like I am. And I'm kind of shocked. Okay?
You know, if this touched a nerve, we're glad, because they're valid responses and concerns and worries.
Yeah.
If it touched a nerve, it's valid. So I completely accept that there's emotion behind what you say. I think what Darren was speaking about is that, yes, we are doing our job, but it is tremendously challenging to navigate, and we're trying to build a sense of understanding and what works and what doesn't. We've heard really strongly about some things that don't work, and have to take that back and figure out how to find some more and better solutions. That my goal is met for tonight, right? Like, that's
It's stressful
right?
for all of us.
I know it's stressful.
Very,
absolutely.
very stressful.
So, because you don't know when or how. You mentioned again 2 years. What I also said in addition to that is, as soon as possible, if we get the team in place this fall and the contribution agreement signed, those that need to go sooner, we want to make that option available this calendar year. Like that, it's like for people who want to stay further, you know, as long as 2 years, perhaps more if they're in the right place. But that's what we're saying.
All I want out of all of this is what I had a year and a half ago. Okay, just put me on a piece of land someplace else in town. I'll plant some new grass. I'll make it look pretty. Because like I said, we were in the process of beautifying our house anyway. As soon as we have all of that done, it goes up for sale, and I get my ass out of this town.
Okay, Dave has a question.
Well, question or comment or whatever, and I actually wasn't going to stand up tonight. But, and I'm sorry, this is going to be a little bit off topic. But it's back to something Kevin's talking about, and that is borrowing the money. When the city asked the province for enough money to pay us pre-flood, They weren't doing that because they thought that was the wrong thing to do. The city as much as admitted that that's the right thing to do. Now, they get told by the province that the province is only going to come up with post-flood. The province is not telling the city that the city can only pay us post-flood. They're saying they're only going to pay post-flood. Now, I don't know, I'm no expert, but a friend of mine who's pretty smart, he's got a computer, he said that if the city borrowed 6.6 million at the low interest that the city is able to borrow at, stretch it out over 40 years, that the tax burden on the individual citizen would be almost negligible. Graham promised us at a meeting a month ago or so that he would find someone in the city to crunch the numbers and let us know exactly what that tax hike would be. It's been dead silent since then. If it was the sauna, if it was Interfor that owned that property down there in North Ruckle, I'm pretty sure I can guarantee you that the city wouldn't be saying to them right now, we'll give you 20 cents on the fucking dollar. Now, I'm sorry, but the city recognizes the right thing to do and is simply refusing to do the right thing because they're afraid of the taxpayer. Now, we circulated a petition last week in a city of 4,000 citizens, figure 2,000 of them pay taxes. 2,000 taxpayers, someone said maybe even just 1,500. The point is, we got somewhere in excess of 600 signatures on that petition in 3 days, asking Farnworth to at least consider paying us pre-flood, doing the right thing. We could reword that petition and send it around the city again, asking the citizens, the taxpayers, if they'd be willing to pay that extra little bit of tax over the next 40 freaking years so that we can get fair money for our land. I don't understand how it is that somehow it seems acceptable that we should be robbed. Some of us have hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for dikes that we can't even stay here to enjoy. We can't afford to live in this town anymore. We have to leave, and you all are going to be enjoying your flood-proof city with our money. I think I've made a few points here, and there's an awful lot more that I want to say, and I was not going to stand up, and I was not going to get angry. I'm done.
To nothing if you do that.
Jennifer.
Can I go next? I think the general message that you're getting from this audience tonight is that we're not going away and we're not going to be quiet about this. And I, for one, would rather work with you guys than have a confrontational experience again. We're here. We're not going anywhere right now. Smaller meetings, more personalized meetings. I think you guys would benefit from that. We would certainly benefit from that. My suggestion is that you do that survey now. Don't spend a lot of time and effort and resources preparing in-kind options that people may not be interested in. Do you know how many people here tonight are interested in the options?
We don't have numbers on anything until we do a survey.
Yeah.
Or just a small group so far.
Yeah, so get the survey out there as quickly as possible. I have a series of questions. Who's on the team right now? So there's you and Daniel, and who else?
Sure. So the team as it is right now, Dolores Sheets, Manager of Development and Engineering and Planning, is basically the overall lead within the city. We just hired a new project manager. He's still in Alberta. He's starting part-time and moving here quite quickly, but I'll just wait for that.
Hello? No, just kidding.
5-minute break. A project manager who's quite comfortable with much larger, bigger projects than this extensive capital construction project experience is coming aboard, and that gives us a sigh of relief because he's able to take on a high level of expertise on this stuff.
Sorry, when is that person starting?
He's actually, I think, did Daniel go? Where's he? Oh, he's here. I think Tuesday, starting Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah.
So you won't be the only one on the hot seat from now on?
Absolutely. So he'd be the one up here talking about all the dikes and all the engineering and all that stuff, and I would only be dealing with the planning side of things here and housing side. So we're both on hot seats.
Okay, and who else is on the team?
As of right now, we've also got still the involvement of Public Works as it relates to the city's infrastructure that's involved in maintenance of all that, and they've been providing input. So David Reed is still involved. There's an engineering technologist position that will be hired, so someone to assist the project manager. We need to know exactly what their expertise is to complement the new project manager. I think am I missing anyone else from the core team?
Some admin support.
Well, there's admin support as well. So there's basically 3 individuals dedicated within the city, as well as a portion of several other people. So an example, a portion of Chris Marsh's time on all the rural area projects. He's the key liaison for everything happening in the rural area, right? There's several people who have to run it off the side of their desk. So I think probably, if you add it all up, it's probably 6 full-time equivalent, but it's a question of reorganizing around the new, we applied for the grant, now we have to implement it, and it's going to be a big stretch, so that's why the council dedicated some funds for the project management team.
Okay, thank you. And, okay, so what happens if we say no to the offers that you make on our properties?
So, once again, I'm ignorant on the overall process, but I understand we have to make offers in good faith and try to come to an acceptable agreement before anything goes near something like expropriation, right? So there's a process that would happen if there was an outright refusal after multiple good faith efforts. It's not treated lightly to go into that because of the cost and the pain for everyone involved. I think that the direction to continue with the projects and try to find to make it work is the charge to the team, but recognizing we're a community and how does that impact us. It's different than a senior government saying there's a dam going on your land. This is the community here, so how do we find a solution, I think is what we'll be charged to look at.
So when these decisions are being made, who is the arbiter? Who is the decision maker?
On the individual property,
the ultimate decision maker on each negotiation. If we say no, who says at what point, okay, this person's going to expropriation or some other process is taking place? Who makes that decision?
I don't know that yet. That's one we'll ask the team to include in the proposal for how it works. And the reason I'm saying I don't know that yet, because I do not know. I know that I would not want anyone.
Can we just let him answer? We need to get the answers.
I do not.
Well, it's the same answer.
So, I do not know.
Okay. And so.
Please, it would be council that makes that decision if there was no.
I'm not saying that.
I have another. Keep that for a second. Keep this for you guys.
Thank you. It would be council that would make the ultimate decision if there was no agreement made. And that would be recommended probably from the professionals that were doing the negotiations in good faith. It would have to come back to council, and council would have to give everything consideration and make the ultimate decision.
So would there be lawyers consulted, city lawyers? Are there city lawyers involved in this right now? What is the involvement of city lawyers or anyone, a legal advisor for the city right now and in the future?
I could speak to, so that, and in terms of the appraisals and the land acquisition, we've had legal advice on the request for proposal to make sure we have the best process possible in the acquisition of the team to meet the needs of the city. But the expertise of legal team on the next steps, we don't have anyone engaged on that until that team actually comes in place, because it's a different project. So we've consulted lawyers about making sure that we've got a request for proposal that is able to get us what we need.
Okay. Can you clarify, be a little more specific? You sort of generally described the process. What is the timing for this buyout process and each of the steps? You had a slide up there before.
Go back one, John.
Yeah, just that one there. So what's the timing on those items?
So where is the topic that says, actually don't have it on there, but the contribution agreement is the biggest variable here. So if the city, province, and feds all have something in place in October, then the land acquisition can start right away, because the team will be in place in late September and preparing their approach at the same timeline that we're finalizing that agreement. So my kind of timeline intent here, and what I understand is reasonable, is this calendar year be able to start and then proceed over a period of time. What that you brought up about the timing of the individual appraisals, do you do one for everyone at the beginning so you have a global picture and then do a follow-up one later on? Those are questions we need for design, but as soon as possible is the question.
Yeah, and because those questions are involved in your design, that's why I'm suggesting you guys do that survey right away, because those are some of the questions that can be answered in a survey. Which ones of us, how many of us want it to happen right away? How many of us want more time? If you're designing something without complete information, it's not going to be useful to any of us, really. And so it's mid-October that the acquisition process starts? Is that
probably the appraisals, and then going on a phase thing for any individual agreements right after that. So if the appraisals happen if the appraisals happen, maybe blanket, but one by one prioritized for those who want them right away. The aim would be to get those starting right at the beginning, but we need input from the team on how exactly that happens. So, that's what we're aiming for in our plan right now.
Okay, I think I just have one more question, and someone else can have the mic. So, just exactly what is the legal process that the city is undertaking right now in terms of the buyouts? Like, what sort of legal authority does the city have to do this right now?
So the municipality has the ability to acquire land and sell land. Our corporate officer could probably speak to this, or actually whatever council as well. But there's authority to do that for any type of project. That's the direction of council.
No, what I was going to comment on was just clarification on the agreements have to be in place before any work can be done on appraisals or discussions, and that hasn't happened yet.
Which agreements, sorry?
Between the city and the province, and the city and the federal government.
So the contribution
agreements, yeah, thank you. And so if those don't happen, if they happen before the writ is dropped, which is anticipated to be sometime in September, then that's going to be delayed until after the election and there's a new minister and a new government. So I don't want anybody in this room to think that things are going to start happening in October, for sure, because they may not, and it's all going to depend on this. So I just didn't want anybody to be confused and saying, well, Councillor Thompson told me, or Graham told me that this was going to be happening in October. It may, we hope that it will, but there's no promise.
And it's also dependent on approval of the contribution agreement by the provincial authority and the federal authority, is that correct?
I believe that's correct, John. Those agreements have to be in place.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
I was just wondering if we get to see a draft of the contribution agreement. Like, do we get to see what is being put forward, or is that?
secret.
It's a corporate officer question.
Great. I would say because the document is in draft form in between the province and the city, it's a document that's being discussed in between those parties. Once the agreement is final and we get approval from the province, then that's a different story. Then we can probably proceed and share it.
Can we see the draft?
Just want to go back to one of Jennifer's questions that Graham had no answer for. I thought maybe Councillor Thompson might. The question was, and this is a good question, if none of the offers, if we just say no to all of it, if nothing's good enough for us, are we looking at expropriation? Or what's the bottom, where does this end? Is it going to go to expropriation, or is it, you got something else in mind for us? Because it's a possibility that we could just say no to every single offer. So you must have had this, you must have thought about that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Dave, and
We want to know what's...
the bottom line,
We're looking down the barrel, we want to know what kind of gun it is.
the bottom line is that we have been given a grant of $53 million, and the city is putting in, I think it's 3.5, to do the diking, to do the buyouts, to do the repairs, to do all of these things. If everybody in North Ruckle refused to the buyout, then it would have to come back to council, and we would have to think long and hard, because that's going to involve legal expenses for the city's taxpayers. It's going to incur legal expenses for each property owner if expropriation is the option that we choose.
What other options would you possibly have? I mean, are we looking at just all the other talk aside? What are we looking at here if it just goes to the bottom? Is it expropriation?
No, there'd be no grant money. And that is something that council would have to consider.
But you'd still have your grant money.
No.
How are you going to get us off our land? You're going to get us off our land. We're not arguing that. Somehow you're going to get us off our land.
One way or the other.
No. Just hang on, Joe. Somehow you're going to get us off our land. How is it you ultimately propose to do that? I'd really like to know.
Ultimately, we would like to have an opportunity to work with every property owner and to come to an acceptable arrangement to buy your properties.
Understood.
Okay? So the two choices are...
I'd like that too, but I'm just trying to get right.
No, I hear you, Dave. And this is something that council would have to go back and consider. There's probably two options, and I'm just speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for council. The two options are, we say thank you, but no thank you to the grant money, and we leave everybody in Ruckle as is, and if it floods again, you're on your own.
No, that's scare tactics, and that's just...
I'm sorry if it's scare tactics.
But it's wrong.
You have money for dikes.
Yes.
No, we would not have money for dikes. If we give up any portion, the only money that the city is putting in is $3.5 million. The money for the dikes is coming from the DMSA grant.
I understand that.
And if we lose that, if we don't come to some sort of a conclusion and agreement, we run the risk of losing it all.
Right, so if we don't sell
Hold
out,
on, let Dave talk, please.
She was just getting to it. She was saying there was two things that could happen. One, you give the money back. Okay, what's the other?
Well, the other one is that, and this would have to be a decision of council, is do we, as a local government, want to enter into an expropriation for the North Ruffalo area. And that's it, I mean, I said this before at some of the meetings at the secondary school. Ugly, ugly, ugly process.
I know, you don't even want to speak the word, neither do I.
Yep.
But I think it had to be spoken, like, out in the open, just so that we know what we're looking at here. And now we know the caliber of gunmen.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to point guns at anybody. I just want you to have the facts to be informed, so that when you are being approached for a possible buyout, and a potential buyout, and hopefully an agreement, you have the other knowledge that, okay, you know, this is what I could be doing. And, you know, as I said, I just want everybody to be able to make informed decisions as it relates to their own properties, to their own. We as a council understand that we are dealing with lives here. And don't think we take that lightly, because we don't. And we are very concerned. We have difficult decisions to make, and we don't make them lightly. And I just want to assure everybody that we, as a council, have to make decisions on what we believe is for the best for the community as a whole.
What is our choice?
So there's actually there's a couple of hands up before you're first here. And let's get this, yeah, there we go.
Christine, and Mayor, what I had is, I had written a letter to the mayor and council. And my letter, I asked to be read at a meeting. It was a Monday meeting. I'm not sure where that letter went. I'm not sure where that letter went. Do you answer all letters that are given to you?
I can speak to that.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
So all the letters that are received go into a weekly summary package that goes to council. We can't have every letter going to a council meeting due to agenda reasons and whatnot. We receive a lot of letters almost every day. There's 10 to 15 sort of mail items coming in for council. So we have a process where we scan them all in and add them to the council summary package that they get every week. So council would have seen your letters. Like I say, there's a lot coming in every day.
Well, I'm sorry, some of us have to work, right? And can't attend a Monday morning meeting.
Yep.
And I had requested, anyways, I wanted on record that I had addressed the mayor and the councils a question. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we get a lot of letters, Natalie, and if you didn't, if it was on an agenda, it would have been probably in the regular meeting agenda, and most often we receive letters for information. But if I would think, and I would hope, that if it was a formal letter, that it was responded to.
Oh, it was not.
Hello? Yeah, no.
Actually, just one question. There are people leaving who have their hands up. But before you leave, you had a question. Did you want to? Were you able to share that? Or Rick? Rick. Sorry, you had your hand up a minute ago and you didn't have a chance to speak earlier. Just
I was just trying to block the camera glare though.
Okay. Okay.
I will make this quick. To me, there were two options that were given, but the third option that I have for myself is that I won't leave. I want to stay. What will you do?
I hear what you're saying, And if I were probably in your position, I'd be feeling the same way. But we would have to cross that bridge when we come to it. I'm not going to give a definitive answer tonight because I can't. There's been no negotiations, no discussion. I have suggested, as in my own opinion, the options that council would likely have to consider.
Do you understand what that does to my well-being?
I empathize. I'm not in your position. All I know is if I were, I would be a screaming Mimi. And I'm not. I empathize. I wish I could tell you what you want to hear. I can't.
And no answers.
At this time, no. Because we don't have the information on which to make a decision. We have to wait for that information.
Gordon has a question there.
A quick question for you. You were talking about hiring people before I forget. Is the mandate to hire somebody who has experience in flood-related issues? Or are you just hiring somebody? Because I've heard it said numerous times that we've never had this before. Everybody's sort of learning as they go. So I would hope that if you're going to hire somebody else, you might actually hire somebody who's been through this, who know how the government thinks, and maybe they can get to the bottom and find resources that the other people perhaps don't have privy to.
I just wanted to ask the council here, what are our choices? Just go back to what Dave was talking about, and then the expropriation or the voluntary acceptance of a buyout or the saying no. What are our choices? I know she was about to, but she never got to there.
No, I think I did. I said we would want to negotiate with the professionals that would be contracted to do that, a buyout.
Are we going to be allowed, is anybody going to be allowed to stay?
No.
Then we don't have a choice.
What?
Then we don't have a choice.
But I would suggest that if we can't come to an agreement, that council would have to consider the expropriation option, which
That's fine.
it's ugly. We don't want to have to go there.
Oh, let's go.
We want to work with you. And as I said, I wish we could all make everybody whole again, but we can't.
Okay, so we don't have a choice. We are moving.
Well,
just how you're going to do that,
that's bullshit.
You don't know.
I suppose that's unfortunate, but those are the answers. Those are the considerations.
One more quick question. What Jennifer was asking about who makes that decision about, what was that part, Jennifer? The final arbiter?
Who makes the decision about when the negotiations are over? Okay, nobody can reach an agreement, now we go to expropriation.
And you said that it would be council.
Well, council would receive a report saying that there had been several offers made. We're going to use you as an example. Several offers made in good faith to buy your property out. You have refused.
Is good faith a year and a half or 2.5?
You know, these things take time.
3.5.
It's frustrating.
No.
Just to answer the question,
Jesus.
No. You know, I understand the frustration.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I think I do. But what I'm saying is, sir, is that if you refused any of the offers made in good faith, and we couldn't come to an agreement, or you couldn't come to an agreement, we would receive as a council a report. Then we would have to make the determination of whether or not to proceed with expropriation.
so that's council does that.
Council does.
What experience or knowledge do you have about the process to be able to make that decision?
Well, I worked for the city for 23 years.
Have you gone through this?
Yes, we went through an expropriation of property, and I tell you, it's ugly.
Can you explain what you mean by ugly? Like what is it about?
Well, because it goes to court, and it takes the property owner is then basically forced to accept the offer, an offer. The judge would make that decision. Wouldn't be you.
But there's a lot more rights and caveats in an expropriation than what we're being offered from the city right now.
Well, yeah, but then that means you have to hire a lawyer to defend your position.
I'm just gonna call time because I feel like we've circled around this topic a couple of times. We don't have all the information on the table, and the matter of expropriation, how it would be dealt with in the ultimate thing, council would need to hear the expert input on that eventuality. The point is that it's better to find a voluntary agreement. And
my point is that they're expropriated by another name.
It's a process. Before you've spoken extensively, so
A year and a half later, you have not given us a start.
this is a really long process.
Yeah.
Right? And I know you're frustrated.
Why does it happen in all over Canada where it takes 3 months?
Some places took 3 months immediately after a flood. Some have taken 6 years to get to this place right here. So it is a wide variety. New Jersey as well. It takes 6 years. So it's a process. So anyways,
We're taking a step back, Graham.
I'm going to take a step back here and just ask for people who have not spoken yet, yourself, anyone else indicate, because I want to make sure we hear from others in the room. So you and then you, okay? And then down.
Hi, so there's a lot going on here, and I've come up with these ideas and I've written about a couple of times, but a main theme that keeps coming up amongst city council and amongst everyone is fairness, right? Fairness to everyone in this room, fairness to the citizens of Grand Forks as a whole, and it's been deemed that it isn't fair, or there's a premise that it isn't fair to the overall citizens of Grand Forks to subsidize the difference in $6.6 million to come up with pre-flood values. Is that correct? More or less? So then we're, as a neighborhood, being told to subsidize that $6.6 million through our property values. Has it even been looked at by City Council, what Dave was bringing up? What would the actual cost to the City of Grand Forks tax base be to borrow that $6.6 million and have it be paid in taxes over 20 or 30 or 40 years? Has that even been looked at? Has the population been asked about that? Or like in some cases when taxes go up, it's not even so much as a question as just this is what's happening to benefit the population as a whole, which is what this project, this flood mitigation, is intending to do, is to protect the population, infrastructure, the town of Grand Forks as a whole. I'm not sure if there's a question.
So there is a question. It's probably about process. A referendum would be required of the entire electorate, or an alternative approval. There's a couple of ways to get at it, but for something like this, it would be a referendum. And so the preparatory work to get there and making sure everything is incredibly well understood is a really, really large process. But council can comment. I'm not sure.
I guess my last comment on that piece too is from our perspective, we, I think as a whole, would like to do away with that premise that it's unfair to tax the population of this entire area to put in a protective service for that entire population.
Exactly. That's the point.
Graham, you just mentioned about a referendum. Go to the city, whole population, decide whether or not to raise taxes to borrow the $6.6 million. Is that correct? Would there also be a referendum for the people of Ruckle?
They would be included.
Okay? No. I'm just saying, just a referendum for Ruckle alone on this buyout. Because like this gentleman said, we are going to finance part of this flood recovery. We've already been told that. Not asked, we've been told. Has the rest of the city been told that they may have to come up with a few extra dollars on their taxes to help pay for this? Okay? Why are we being the ones targeted to help pay for this, to save the rest of the city? But the rest of the city isn't being asked to put up money to help pay for this. Because it's supposedly, what I've heard through, like you say, different people, okay, is that the rest of the city doesn't want to get involved and they do not want their taxes to go up to pay for us. Because we might come out ahead. Okay? So give us a referendum of whether or not this money should be borrowed or not, and see what you come up with.
Because we're taxpayers too.
You know?
How could we even come up with a negotiation when I'm not answered from the city? I have a business. What kind of communication is that? I address the city and there is no communication back to me. I don't know where this letter went, Daniel. I don't know where this letter went. If you're representing someone, I want to know what you spoke were good words, how well your city's working or whatever. How can I talk with you when I don't get an answer? Where do I begin? Where do I begin? Who do I address the letter to? I would like to know.
Thank you. We'll follow up on that. Sure.
Yeah, so the right way is to send it to mayor and council. If it's addressed to be read in a meeting, usually it should make it on the agenda. That's correct. If it was something where a lot of members were sending in similar questions or similar concerns, it would go into the weekly summary package. So guaranteed your letter went into that package. There's a lot of those coming in. We don't have the staffing resources to do that part right now, to answer every single letter, especially if there are general concerns where there is a public meeting being held, for example, from BFR, right, to address some of these issues anyways. We try to put out news releases that address, or frequently asked questions that address all these issues in one spot, so that the entire citizens membership can more or less see it.
Thank you. But I heard you say that you represented business
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
Business. Do you know who I am?
Yes, you're a massage therapist, or I believe.
Anyways, I have not had any exposure from you ever. That's just not.
So what my role is with the city for the economic piece, I'm in charge of the financial piece for the Rural Dividend Fund to make sure that the money is spent appropriately. So I work with the Chamber and the DBA, who at the end are the boots on the ground to more or less make some of these programs happen, some of the marketing campaigns, this Roger Brooks stuff that happened with trying to marketing campaign. So that's my level. I'm on the higher end there, trying to make sure that we're spending the funds that we're receiving from the government appropriately, and we stay in the parameters of that grant, the same as Graham is trying to stay in the parameters of his grant, what he can do.
Okay, so I hear that you have a lot of experience in what you do and you're staying in a parameter, but you also have a stake in this buyouts, right? Isn't it? A double doozy. I had one question. No, I had one question that I had on the letter. It's been months, I haven't heard from you guys. Who do I phone? Who do I talk to?
What's your question, Natalie?
I'd like you guys to read it. I'd like you guys to read it. I'd like you guys to read it. I'd like you guys to read the letters.
All right. Okay, thank you. We've heard that. There's a question here, and then Dan, you can hear me.
Could you just speak to the plan for Granby Road? Because my dad's property is the third property on the left.
Sure.
And I'm here on his behalf because he had a stroke before the flood and now lives in Boundary Lodge.
Thank you.
And I've heard things that roughly where the dike's going to go, which would be through his shop, and then also that Granby Road would be built up like 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah, so we're going to schedule a separate meeting for the Granby Road and the South Ruckle drainage, but briefly, there's 2 pieces to that. One, there's a sewer that runs between the properties on Granby Road and the river. It's on the riverside for a lot of that alignment, and there's a road already, it's not a road, but it's called a road on the survey. So the dike would be aligned there, but a portion, like a 3 meter or 10-foot portion of the properties, for most of the properties would be required there, and so it's a partial property buyout. In some cases, there's, and some of the properties, there's buildings or improvements that are on that, so a shed or a workshop or whatever. So if that was the case, that would have to be compensated. In other cases, it's bare land. In one case in that area and elsewhere in the city, there's improvements that are on city land. So there's going to be some site-specific design and consultation and a meeting with that group. And then the raising of the road is a second piece. It was something that we applied for the funding and approved for the funding, but it needs a site-specific design to know how high it is and then how you deal with the land grade between the road and the houses to make sure there isn't a cliff to make access and drainage and everything work properly. So site-specific questions, and we want to follow up once we have the engineer ready.
Okay, so when is the meeting for that one going to be?
We're thinking of doing an information meeting just to explain kind of this stuff first, but as soon as the design engineer is on and can do a site investigation, that might be a few months off at least. I need the project manager to give me the answer for that one.
And will that be the paper, like when that meeting is?
Yeah, or direct contact. Yeah.
Okay, because I have other things to talk about, but I mean, if there's to be a meeting specific to
Yes.
Granby Road.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's other concerns, but then I would just talk to them then.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hello. I was hoping somebody else would bring this up, but they haven't. I just wanted to talk about the in-kind stuff a bit. And from what I've read and what I've been seeing, it sounds like we're getting a lot of positive feedback, that you guys are getting positive feedback. I didn't go to any of the meetings because there wasn't anything there that was going to be helpful to me. And I'm hearing from a lot of people that they're not interested in any of this. Some of the decisions I've made, I mean, land or leasing land or whatever, there's been nothing out there that would help me. And I know quite a few other people in the same situation. So I don't know if you guys are taking that into consideration. Money is about the only thing that's going to help me pay down the debt that I've acquired. And, unless there's something else that you guys are coming up with, I don't know what I'm going to say right now, but maybe I shouldn't say it. You guys have to work on something else.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just as a follow-up to what Dan said, a number of people have given me their wants and what they would consider acceptable for in-kind. And this is by no means a complete list. There's 11 homeowners on here. It consists of information provided by some of the property owners, so I don't want this, I wrote right on the top of here, I'm going to give this to you, Graham. This is not a public consultation in any way, shape, or form. This is just some examples.
From 11 people.
Yeah, exactly. This is some people, and it will give you an idea of the direction that we're going with this. And again, I want to emphasize it's critical that the city consults directly with individual owners in regards to these situations, and face-to-face meetings, and does a survey of us all. So options that are considered acceptable and desirable by owners will be those that are not only viewed as fair value by us, but also offer incentives for us to remain in Grand Forks rather than moving elsewhere. And unfortunately, right, in the current options, I'm not seeing an incentive to keep me here. So I'm going to give this to you now, but again, this is just some examples. It's by no means a complete list.
Thank you. That's what this is for, so thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Graham, I have a question. So property owners that are impacted and the appraisers are going to be coming in. Is there anything to preclude the property owner from having their own realtor attend that discussion with them?
I think a realtor or other representation professionals, or et cetera, I think that would be normal. I don't see why it would be inappropriate.
Coming up.
My question would be to the city, we've got 2 derelict abandoned houses next to us. When are they gonna come and start cleaning up some of the grass? Because it's a fire hazard, and it's, you know, they can come and board the houses up, but they can't come and cut the grass. It's just gonna get worse. It looks like we're gonna be there a couple of years.
I can answer that one. I believe our building inspector has been looking at hiring contractors and making arrangements to clean some of the higher, taller grasses up in the neighborhood.
Well, if you're gonna cut the grass, the dike down by our place, we used to maintain it, but now it's covered in gravel, and I'm not gonna run my lawnmower over it, so the city can come and do it. However, my question is far from there. I asked earlier if you're considering hiring somebody with pre-flood experience, and if so, are they coming from Alberta or Quebec or wherever else where they've actually gotten their money up front? And, yeah. I waited so long, I forgot my other question.
So we've had consultants working with us, including Paul Edmonds, who dealt with situations like this in the United Kingdom for 23 years. We've had engineering teams, including the Norex team from Alberta that dealt directly with High River and Calgary, and we've consulted with planners and decision makers from each of those places. Finding the individual expertise to hire is part of the story, but it's also getting people who are going to bring the right consultants on board. So property side for the appraisal and negotiation team, people who have run the gamut of simple property negotiations right through expropriation and understand all aspects of the risks. That would be their qualifications. In terms of capital projects, a dike or a restoration is similar in some ways to earthworks for a dam, for a tailings pond or something. Someone from the mining industry would have expertise. There's contractors that can do that type of work. So I would say that we're looking at all expertise, and where we have a gap on staff, trying to fill it with consulting. It's hard to find staff who've been there and done that.
The other question I have, we talked about a referendum. Can anybody here tell me why that would make any difference at all? Since hell, we had 800 people signing a petition saying they didn't want a water meter, and we stuffed it down our throat, and we lost a couple of $1 million, and we're still paying for it. We bought a fire truck that we didn't need, as far as I'm concerned. It's going to be a derelict in 10 years. That was only $1.5 million. But we can't burden the rest of the taxpayers for a whole bunch of homes that's going to affect individual families and their life forever.
All right, it's been remarkably quiet on this side of the room and about half of this side of the room. Any questions or comments from here or here? We've covered some topics really well and others not so much. Any other comments? So I'm recognizing the need to, it's 9 o'clock, wind down fairly soon. I've been up here a lot. Are there any observations from other team members or any questions that they've come to that they want to share at this point?
No, because we have questions.
We cannot address them all tonight, so we're going to have more meetings.
Can I just ask one last question? When you, at the beginning you said that you had asked whoever why they're not giving us pre-flood value. Can you tell me who it was that you asked? Who gave those the answer? No.
So the request for supplemental funding went to Emergency Management BC, and the feedback came in June, and so the answer is, with the minister responsible for that. In terms of the other feedback from non-decision makers within that area, we've heard that people have brought that question forward towards our MLA. The question has been brought forward from within the population of the city to other representatives. So it's been kind of part of that zeitgeist. I'm not going to name names from who told the messenger, but I think you can probably hear it on the wind. So
is it Jennifer Rice's area or Farnworth's area?
Jennifer Rice is a parliamentary secretary and is a policy liaison, but then she's not on the approval of funds end of things. Mr. Farnworth is one of the decision makers involved. And so the process where a request goes through analysis and then cabinet decision is completely secret, but that's basically what would happen with a request. It goes in and has the analysis and then a decision.
And it's Farnworth's department then?
Well, it's also finance. That's the big thing. It's multiple ministries. Finance makes a decision about what they can spend that level of funding on.
Okay, thank you.
As part of a board. So. Sorry.
Quick one. Once you've
Once we have the contribution agreement signed between us and the province and us and the feds, as long as we stick to whatever agreement we make, do they kind of back off? It feels like they've been sort of calling the shots, and we're just sort of doing whatever we need in order to get the funds, we just, whatever they say. Is there going to be a point where we have a little bit of autonomy, or is that contribution agreement, still going to be kind of inhibiting your and the council's ability to make choices that are a little bit more to do with our city?
It's a really good question, and one that's been raised. And part of the requirement is that there's an oversight committee of the federal and provincial government that is basically there to help us keep on track. And also if we come up with problems to help resolve them. So if we end up with, a major species at risk thing going on, or archaeological site that causes a major delay or funding increase, that oversight committee would be there to help solve the problem and see if we're able to find a different way around it. So my understanding is they're there to help support the process, but they're also there to make sure that their policies and requirements are met. So it's a mutual support thing, but at the end of the day, they want to see a successful project, and my understanding is they need to be in the loop as we do it, go through it. Yeah.
Is there no way of changing minds, Graham, in the provincial or federal government about this funding?
That's not something I can ask, but I know our council members and mayor will be meeting with decision makers again to follow up on the question. So that's where the answer is.
Mr. Mayor, have you thought about asking your constituents about the tax thing?
A referendum?
Well, yeah.
A referendum has not been discussed at council at this point. I'm sure that we could bring it up. I think the real problem is that the city itself, in getting this agreement in place, can't continue to be the stumbling block to moving forward. And so I don't know how practical a referendum would be, and my personal opinion of it is that it would not be successful, that the rest of the city would not agree to tax increases to support the North Rock.
That's your opinion?
That's strictly my opinion.
And if I can add to that, someone that I don't remember who brought forward a request to know what the impact would be on a loan through the MFA. And I think that is something that we can request of our Chief Financial Officer to run some numbers for us. And then, again, council can make an informed decision if we want to proceed with a referendum or an alternative approval process. But I think it's a good idea, and I think it's one that we should look at. And it's not just, I know that only the Ruckle people would like to be able to support that. And that would be a local improvement area, and I don't think that's going to work. But I think until we get the numbers, until we can make a more informed decision on if it's a viable option that we want to pursue, I think it's a good idea, and I would like to see that information, and then we can go from there and discuss it in a public process as well.
Do we know how our taxes compare to other communities our size?
Oh, I'm putting on an old hat now. The taxes in other communities our size, taxes are based on assessed values. We are fortunate, we have two industries. Some municipalities our size don't have an industry. And so the tax rates are calculated and based on those ratios, and so it's an impossible question to really give a good answer, because no municipality has the same assessments, and so or the same, some are very heavily residential. As I said, we've got two industries. Another municipality may have one industry. It depends on their commercial core. There's a whole raft of variables, and so that's not an easy question to answer.
There must be a standard tax rate.
No, there's not. Municipalities do their own tax rates. There are ratios that are determined, and those ratios are given by the provincial government, and the others are dictated by the province or the taxing authority. We only have control over what we as a municipality levy as a tax. So it's not just the city taxes you're paying. You're paying school taxes and regional taxes, and in some cases policing taxes, and hospital taxes, and a whole variety of things. So the only ones we can control are our own.
And I just have one quick other question for you. Have you talked to the major industries you're talking about, like Rockville and Newport, and getting commitment from them that you're going to be here for 10 more years?
We would hope that they're going to be here for 10 more years, but we don't know.
So we could be suffering North Rockville and they can pull up next year.
That's possible.
So there's already been talked about doing it, right? The lumber industry's in trouble, talked about it a couple of years ago, but
Well,
Sawmills are closing across the province. Sawmills are shutting down across the province.
Yeah.
I know. My son works for Tolco, and he's in the head office, and it's been very difficult.
So are we sure this is the route we want to go? If we're not sure that those two industries, which could be flood mitigation area, are going to be here long enough to...
I think I'm just gonna, this is a whole other set of topics that could probably take about an hour to resolve. It's a really good question. There is a question over here, and we're losing people quickly.
We're losing people quickly, so let's call this one the last question.
Last one, yeah.
Okay, part of it's question, part of it's statement. I keep telling my children that perception is one of the biggest tools there is out there, how you perceive a situation. And I will say, kind of old news, I felt offended that the mayor stood on national TV and said that those of us in Ruckle were looking for help and that we were low income. Again, it's a perception. Watch your news reports, you did it. We're not all low income. We didn't all ask for this help. Some of us had insurance. We were able to afford it. We were offered it. Where I'm looking for help now in terms of perception is, okay, we are going to be assessed. You drive through our neighborhood, and yeah, we do look like we're that low-income neighborhood now. And I realize we have homeowners that have passed away. We have homeowners that live in other communities and aren't able to be there to maintain their lands. We had to actually contact the city, and in return, they contacted the mill to ask them to maintain their boulevards. We, as taxpayers, are told, you know, you need to maintain. I'd like to see the city maintain. And then, because I don't know who to talk to, they say the Mennonite disaster aid has come in, and they're looking, you know, they want to help. They're here to help us. Maybe that is something that they could do with assessments coming. You know, they drive through, they look at the neighborhood, and they go, oh, this is bad. If the neighborhood is neat and tidy, you know, it gives the perception that things aren't so bad. So maybe they could ask some of these volunteers to, and I realize we run into legalities of going onto people's private property, but maybe they could maintain the boulevards or some of these houses that are looking, you know, not so much the home, but the yards. Just give it a quick tidy. Maybe it's a house proud thing. I don't know. So that's just, I don't know who you would ask if that's possible, that the neighborhood could be maintained a little bit.
Thank you. So there's two parts to the question, and one of them is relating, you know, will that affect the appraisal value? And is there, you know, I think it goes back to Jordan's question about stigma and stuff and making sure there isn't that effect. So we'll ask the appraisal team to consider that risk and, you know, to consider that the trauma and the impact in the community that's caused that condition. But the beautification aspect, I think, is something that we can look at another way of following up on the boulevards or other involvement. We definitely have to do more than send letters to households where they're suffering to ask them to fix up the flips. They can't.
They can't.
Yeah. So
then we have our businesses. But there are people that have, I mean, your yard is beautiful. Your neighbors across the street are beautiful. You know, there are people that are making the effort. I realize there are people that can't. But maybe this is where somebody can step in.
Thank you, that's great, and it was like, I feel like a positive point to end on. So, thank you for all your patience.
If I could make one other comment really relating to that as well. I feel bad because my home that I used to live in is one of those that's completely derelict, abandoned, boarded up, and it looks terrible. And I fear that it is decreasing the value of our neighborhood more than some might, because perception is a big part of things, and stigma around the situation that we're now in. I was painted into a corner though, because I had flood endorsement and didn't get full insurance due to a technicality of bylaw, yada yada. Anyways, when the city was saying that they were proposing and hopeful, everything seemed really positive towards pre-flood value, which is great, and likely, we keep talking about the fairest option to just go back 15 months, provide that, everyone can go on and move to something of equal value to that. I couldn't remortgage what I already owed the bank in order to build a new house for, you know, whatever cost of building is these days, $300,000 to build something of equal value, only to be offered pre-flood value at then a loss of, say, $200,000 to myself. So I had to sit and wait, hoping that pre-flood values would come through. Now that they haven't, I own something that's derelict and of no value, essentially, what I'm being told. So had I the means and time right now to do that, could I build a $500,000 house and have it be appraised as such, only to then have it bulldozed to protect the rest of the city anyways? It seems like such a flawed way to look at it.
Yeah. And that's why I haven't done anything else to my house. It's just getting crunched up and thrown in the dump. Why in the heck would I be putting more stuff in the landfill? Right?
all right, so thank you all for coming and for the marathon tonight, and we're going to follow up with, I think, another meeting within the month and bring the update on the appraisal team as soon as I think that's the next standpoint to introduce that process. So we'll be in touch again. Thanks.
Thank you.